While the music calls everyone from lunch, we are announcing a special session called Private Opinion, Separate Opinion. Yesterday, I said that some of the participants, actually all of the participants, are unique people with unique information, unique experience, unique professions. But some of them do not match the topics of the main sessions, but we cannot but use their experience. We have to share it. And I'm inviting
Jennifer Francis. Один из лучших музейных пиарщиков мира.
One of the best PR persons in the world.
I did want to say good afternoon in Russian, and then I learned it overnight, and then I promptly forgot it. But I really want to say hello in Russian because I've been really, really grateful to be here with you. I'm really enjoying your fabulous city. I'm enjoying this forum. I'm going to talk to you about media relations in practice and a little bit about marketing. I really feel honoured and privileged to have been allowed to have taken part in what I see as historical professional debates, which have engaged us so far over the last 2 days. And I see it as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So, spasiba, at least I can say that. And as I said, this is the institutional perspective, because of course we too make up a large part of the overall arts community. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to structure my presentation by sharing information about the organisation I work for, the Royal Academy of Arts. I shall talk to you a little bit about the UK media landscape, about our modus operandi in terms of how we do press relations, and I'll share with you my 10 golden rules of media relations, and also my thoughts on social media and blogging. So, the Royal Academy of Arts, it's 243 years old. It was founded by King George III in 1768. It has a unique position of being independent, which is privately funded, and it's led by eminent artists and architects. The original mission was to promote the creation, enjoyment, and appreciation of the visual arts through exhibitions, education, and debate. The original founding members included Joshua Reynolds and William Chambers. Today, the original ethos of the 18th century founders continues, and we have Royal Academicians such as Norman Foster, Anthony Gormley, Nicholas Grimshaw, David Hockney and Tracy Emin as Royal Academicians. In the beginning, they always had an annual exhibition, which was, it's grown now into what is the world's largest open submission exhibition. It's called the Summer Exhibition, and it is really as democratic as all artists around the world are invited to submit work during a period of time which generally opens in January and closes in March. And then the work is selected by academicians, and you really could hang on the walls of the Royal Academy, salon style, next to some of the greatest artists of the day. As well as that, at the Royal Academy, there is also a small collection. Unlike the bigger galleries like the National or the British Museum or the Victoria and Albert Museum, And so the collection is largely what's called diploma works, which as you become a Royal Academician, you deposit a work in the collection. And one of the finest, one of the best fine art libraries in Britain also resides on Piccadilly, where the RA is, as well as an art school, the oldest art school in the country. The Royal Academy Art School was set up when the institution was first set up, because it was set up by artists wanting a market for their work on the one hand, but they also understood the importance of educating tomorrow's artists. And that school continues. It is fee-free. It's the only 3-year postgraduate diploma in the UK, and at any one time there are 60 students. So this is basically our summer exhibition imagery, just to punctuate that. And one of the differences between the Royal Academy and the other institutions, the larger institutions, is they have a large permanent display. We don't. We tend to survive on loan exhibitions, and we've had amazing exhibitions over the years. We've done from Russia, which came from 4 institutions here. This was a really big exhibition for us in 2008. We currently have Building a Revolution, which once more has got work from the Shushev Museum. It's a smaller exhibition that's on at the moment at the Royal Academy, but we've also done Van Gogh, which was the largest Bilin exhibition in London last year. We got nearly 500,000 visitors. We've done Aztecs, which has done more than 500,000 visitors. We did Anish Kapoor, which was very, very successful 2 years ago. We currently have Degas. In January, we will open an amazing exhibition by David Hockney. So you sort of get the flavour in terms of the exhibitions we put on tend to have a thesis behind it, and they obviously have to bring in a certain number of visitors, because that is part of the economy of the institution. And what you'll hear is, to a certain extent, we need to pay attention to audiences, to visitors, to the consumer experience. That's the other side of the arts world, and in particular institutions, because one of the things that we have as an issue, which was alluded to yesterday, is staying relevant. Staying relevant in the 21st century, that's a big issue. So, in numbers, the press team at the RA, in numbers, we place over 2,500 articles a year. We have over 30 media mentions a week. We have over 750 media calls to our offices a month. We do up to 25 television features a year, many filming projects. We coordinate interviews. On the marketing side of things, we have just under 1 million visitors a year. We have a large friends scheme. We have 100,000 friends. My team work on between 6 to 8 pay-in exhibitions a year, as well as quite a few non-pay-in exhibitions for Royal Academy schools, for our collection in the fine rooms, in our library, architectural exhibitions. We generate over 1 million pieces of print a year in terms of publicity, and we place, that's my team, over 6,500 advertisements a year, and that's everywhere from the London Underground to the bus network. We advertise on telephone boxes, in newspapers, of course, in the cinema, on taxis, and the National Rail network. Now, we've got a database of 2,500 journalists, but we generally work to a list called the 150 list. And for a minute, what I'm going to do is just talk to you a little bit about the UK media landscape, just so you understand. There are over 784 radio stations, over 512 television channels, nearly 1,600 newspapers, and nearly 2,000 magazines from about 287 media owners. So that is how big the landscape is, and it's growing by the day. As well as that, in terms of online, as you'll have heard earlier on, there are, I've got my number here, but basically, online, it's a growing, most of the British newspapers have online presences. It started in the mid-90s, but now there are absolutely, it's just multiplied in terms of how many media outlets are now have an online presence, as well as bloggers generally that we find we have to work with, and other websites. We also work in social media. I was asked this question over lunchtime, and it's quite new for us. It's about 2.5 years old in terms of our social media activities, but we have built up 27,000 Facebookers, we've got 15,000 tweeters, and we've got a YouTube channel with 75,000 YouTube subscribers. So my team looks like this. So there's a head of press and marketing on the one side, and then on the press team, it's largely 2 press officers and a press assistant. But I also have a marketing team. I've got 3 marketing officers, I'm a marketing assistant, and we also have a designer that works for our team specially. So the objectives of my team are to generate positive word of mouth. It's about raising awareness, it's about contributing to the 3 to 4 opportunities to see which trigger consumer action. So in marketing speak, what tends to happen is you need to get a message 3 to 4 times, and by that time, it sort of generates action. So what we have to do is build layer upon layer in terms of a campaign to make sure that people get these messages and then want to come across to see what it is we have on Piccadilly in Burlington House. And I wanted to pause here because, as I mentioned earlier on, and I found yesterday, debate was less around the audience and the consumer and the art lover. But as a communicator, of course, there has to be an end point. And we are all involved in the arts because we love it, but we do need to stimulate interest in the general public and encourage them to participate and to enjoy the output. And I'm going to get myself some water. Hold on. So on that note, I wanted to just go on to share what I think is a symbiotic nature. I'm multitasking, thank you. Is a symbiotic nature of public relations in the media. Because from where I stand, we need each other. Thank you very much. As we've heard yesterday and today, the art world, it's about a community, and collaboration is very, very much the order of the day and the topic and the trend at the moment. And relations and relationships are key, because it's all about mutual professional trust, and we are all responsible for building this. So that's something that I just wanted to mention. So in terms of, for every exhibition at the RA, that's our shorthand for what we call ourselves. My team will be responsible for everything from titling of an exhibition to the graphics, the posters I'll have shown you, and you'll see some further imagery later on. We then start to think through the campaign messages. There is a lot of planning. We then start to think through exactly what our media campaign is going to look like, who it is we're trying to target, where the features might be. We then go on to think through exactly where we might want to advertise, what promotions, what partnerships, what we're going to be doing in terms of tourism. And I say that because on the one hand, we're here to talk about art criticism in the press, but I just wanted to give some background to what happens in an institution, as well as to give you a feel of yeah, what it takes to put a big museum show on. And I was mentioning it to some colleagues from the museum world at lunchtime, that we always have shows to promote. That need never goes away. So it's a bit like air traffic control, where you've got 10 or 15 planes lining up to come in. You've got the show you're working on at the moment, you've got the show that opens in 3 months, you've got the one that opens in 6 months, and then you've got the one that's opened in 2015 that you still have to start thinking about and start planning. So it's a continuous process, and that's generally what we do. For a minute, I just wanted to, on the art criticism side, because I'll talk you through what I would see as the key golden rule, or the golden rules in media relations, but I just wanted to share some art criticism points that I found online when I first knew I was coming to speak, and it was just some different opinions. Jonathan Jones is quite important on The Guardian in the UK, and he says that art criticism is not a democracy. You might think it's arrogance or snobbery that leads me to criticise a work of art. And maybe it is, but I'm still right. So that's one perspective from a very powerful art critic. And then there's Stephen Sondheim, whose new book comes out, and he says good reviews can be as harmful as bad ones. So that's that. And then two others I wanted to share. There's, many of you will know Brian Sewell. Brian Sewell is very important, very, very important UK critic, and at times he just makes me laugh, a real sort of belly laugh, because he's just very funny, because he's so clever. But he's also made a public profile of himself of always being just so critical, never quite liking anything. If, in actual fact, if he likes something, then it's probably not going to get the numbers that you want as a museum, because Brian Sewell likes it. But he was writing about Tracy Emin's exhibition that's just closed, very, very big exhibition at the Hayward Gallery. And he says, Emin's skill has been usurped by her personality. And he starts it by saying, a scrupulous art critic must admit that it was with a groan that he greeted the first news of Tracy Emin's exhibition at the Hayward Gallery. With a groan that he read the premature ejaculatory articles, and with a groan that he wandered through this retrospective celebration of unmediated autobiographical relics and self-centered sentimentality. And he finishes that article by saying, skill, if she ever had any, has been usurped by celebrity. Celebrity has been nourished by deliberate outrage and offence. And now, in the constant public parading of private distress, she has developed a hectoring arrogance that conflicts with what is left of the instinctive self-objection that has always been her homemade muse. What's it all about? You, dear Miss Emin, you, but you have never been enough. And I just thought I'd share that because as we sort of look at the concept of good and bad art criticism, there are some critics who it's just in their gift to say what they really think all the time in a very public way, and it doesn't necessarily mean that art won't be sold or shows will be closed. Sometimes that's what you expect. So, just two other things before I go on to the golden rules of media relations. Something else we do a lot at the Royal Academy is we have media partnerships. They're an important part of the way we work. It doesn't necessarily mean you'll get positive coverage, but what it does do is alleviate some of the advertising budget that you might have to spend with particular media. And the best relationships are those where you do get a certain amount of money laid down in terms of media so that you can advertise your show on the one hand, but also you can plan in advance which features you're going to be running over a period of time, sometimes an exclusive, sometimes exclusive content with different media houses, and these are some of the ones that we've worked with in the last few years. And then I was going to go on to just say also, the other thing we find ourselves having to do a lot of the time is have commercial partnerships, whereby it's about reaching other audiences that as an institution you're just not able to reach given your budget, etc., and yet you want the widest number of people to see what it is you do. So, that's social media. So what I wanted to do was just share with you some thoughts in terms of media relations and media planning, and my 10 golden rules. So number one, it's
У меня 10
and more planning. And that is thinking through, are you working with long-term media, short-term media? You need written strategies, you need briefing notes, you need to organise walkthroughs, you need to understand timelines, you need to work to deadline and other people's deadlines. There are strategy meetings. In the UK, we also have something called a clash chart, so that when you start planning your openings, you can all make sure that they don't clash, because it is such a big landscape, and making sure that everything's spaced out. Number two, set measurable objectives in terms of the overall campaign, but also in terms of the consumer. What is it you want to achieve? What is the end result? Is this headline news? Is this about awareness? Is this even about damage limitation? Is this a picture story? Do you need a photo call? These are all things that we find we need to concentrate on. And just talking through, I mentioned earlier on from Russia, I mentioned Van Gogh, I mentioned Degan, I mentioned David Hockney, and from Russia, some of you will remember, this was a show that nearly never happened. I think 19 days before it was about to open, we were told that it was going to be cancelled. And from a media perspective, my job was, well, it was helped in the end, because it meant we really became the centre of the world in terms of news. It was on every broadcast right around the world, this show that was going to be cancelled. And in the end, the British government had to change they had to change policy over Christmas so that we were able to take this show. And really all I'm just pointing out there is, even when you've got a media plan, you've got to have a sort of, you've got to be able to change it on the hoof and change it in a way that works for you, but also you've got to be prepared for the unexpected, because we had the best campaign laid out and it was all thrown into disarray. But because we became a news story, then that in itself just meant more people wanted to see this show that nearly was cancelled. With Van Gogh, just something that happened as on the press day itself, members of the Van Gogh family were available, came to London. Great photo story. It was, the BBC covered it. It was absolutely amazing, and I saw the sort of likeness as well, although they didn't. With David Hockney, that opens in January, but once more we had quite an amazing press conference where we had him on the stage 2 months ago. It then meant that we had just a massive interest. It was one of our biggest press conferences we ever had. We don't generally have press conferences with artists. A lot of the art we show, of course, the artists do not necessarily live in, but just out of that, it generated, I think we had 5 front pages in the UK the next morning, and it was just understanding before we started what it was we were trying to achieve, and then actually recognising success when we got it. So point number 3 is plan and organise your collateral. And by that I mean your media pack. Are you going to do a folder? What's going to be in the pack? Just think that through in advance. What is your message? How are you positioning that message? What press releases? Have you thought about the structure of your press release? What do you need to give out in terms of long lead media and short lead media? These are all considerations in terms of planning a media relations campaign. And then there is select your methodology, and not all things work for all people all the time. So you don't always have to do a press conference. Sometimes there's just press mailing, sometimes there's, are you going to email out? Are you going to do a lunch? Are you going to do a breakfast? Is there background briefings? And I would also caution the use of exclusives, but they are necessary sometimes in terms of knowing you will get a story out. And then there are press trips, and some of my colleagues here will have met me before, because we took some journalists across here to Russia, both St. Petersburg and Moscow in 2008 when we were doing the From Russia exhibition. And what we tend to do a lot of the time, it's not that we've got this never-ending budget that we can work with. A lot of the time, in terms of partnerships and collaborations that I talked about earlier on, we work with tourist boards. And of course, it's in their interest. A lot of them would like to travel journalists, and so we do a partnership there. And so number 5 is the message, and it's those very basic things you learn when you're learning PR. What, where, when, how, why, all in the first paragraph, keeping it simple, honing the message, doing Q&As if as an institution you feel there are going to be difficult questions whereby people want to probe and ask more. And then rehearsing. It's, it is about the run-throughs, and that is how institutions keep a certain, well, it just makes you slicker, and it means a fewer surprises. I'm telling you our secrets now. You'll be probing more, I'm sure, but I thought I'd be as honest with you as you've been with me over the last 2 days. Number 6 is targeting the vehicle. Which media? Not every story is good for everyone. Is it a news story? What exactly are you placing it? Is it a feature? Number 7 in our golden rules is the follow-up. So once you've made contact, once you've got the message out, it's a sort of skills working out who to make contact with, where the interest is, because of course journalists, as we know, do not want to be hounded. Understanding the journalists' deadlines, determining their interest. Sometimes there is disappointment. You'll work with a journalist, you'll place a story, you're expecting it to be in the lead tomorrow. Either something really terrible happens and you get knocked off the front pages, or the editor decides it's going to be pulled. And this is where trust and mutual respect comes in, because it's understanding that you're doing a job, you tried hard, we worked together, it's not going to happen on this occasion, but that doesn't mean that we don't have a relationship for the next time. For us, and as you've discussed at great length over the last 2 days, the role of a critic is important. We tend to organise early access for critics. It's something that we can only do it once the show is hung, but at the same time, we're under pressure. Journalists are asking for earlier and earlier and earlier access, and often we can't do it because our main period before the show opens is hanging the show, and of course no one wants journalists to be just traipsing up, all around the show. But at the same time, we also understand that you want your story. If you come out on a Tuesday or Wednesday, you want your story before then. So generally it tends to be the weekend before, but at the same time we do a big ring round to all the critics and invite them in and give them a slot so they don't have to all come in together, so they don't have to come in on our big press day. So Brian Sewell, I've talked about earlier on, I've talked about Jonathan Jones, and there is still importance of the review on the one hand, because although we work on big features in advance, the review is part of those opportunities to see. But someone mentioned it yesterday and said that there is sort of a waning importance of a critic. That may be so, but they are still important. Number 9 is being firm, realistic and opportunistic. So it's understanding media outlets, it's selecting the right people and places for messages, it's understanding the journalist, it's understanding sometimes even from an institutional perspective, sponsor responsibility, because of course sponsors like mentions. And although they have their press office, it is part of our responsibility to try and to get sponsor mentions where possible. In our press pack, we tend to have a note asking journalists to be just cognizant that shows of the nature that we put on at the Royal Academy could not be done often without a sponsor, and so we do ask for them to, where possible, credit those sponsors. And then I say, remember, it's a relationship, and sometimes facts are all you can give, or sometimes you just have to confirm facts, because sometimes there is a situation where a journalist calls you, a news journalist, it's a story, you can put them off, but other times you realise they're going to run a story, and rather than have the no comment or some other, did not respond in a newspaper, it's better to just fact check and allow someone to have that information. I had a situation last week where actually, by providing the facts of what happened on an instance where it was not our fault, at least the public can judge you once a journalist has those facts. So I just wanted to then go on to say that there is growing importance of social media and bloggers. And I had up here just, some of the main social blogging websites that PR people like to use, but I'll just flick over. I hope you can see it from where you're sat. But from our perspective, I did want to say this about social media and bloggers. It's experimental. There's an aspect of pioneering at the moment. Print journalists are still our bread and butter in terms of being seen by the media. We work in an experimental way with bloggers. For our Degar exhibition that opened in September, we invited in, I think it was 15 hand-picked bloggers to target certain audiences. We brought them in on press day, we gave them catalogues, we gave them press packs, we gave them images. It worked quite well. We probably will do it again, but we are hand-picking who we want to work with. It is about the influential art bloggers and not just everyone, and it's something that we're continuing to watch. And the other thing I wanted to say about social media and bloggers, and I'm probably going to make some enemies here, but for us, we haven't yet worked out what success is, and it's just really a watching brief. And we know in the future it will be, you know, online will be one of the only ways of communicating, or the major way, let's say, of communicating, but I'm not sure when that is. And print newspaper is still important to us. And yeah, so that's what I'll say in terms of that. So I'm just now at this time going to just really run some slides that's going to show you just some of the things we've done in terms of some of the exhibitions we've worked on and some of the marketing programs, and to say how happy I've been to be here. And I'd love to help with anything with the modernisation process that appears to be going on here, both in St. Petersburg and Moscow. And spasiba.
Jennifer, thank you so much. К сожалению, наш регламент...
Unfortunately, our time frame suggests only 3 questions from the audience right now. Only 3 questions are allowed, so those of you who've raised their hands first will get a chance to ask a question. I can see only one hand. Nina. I'm sorry. I will have to excuse myself because I was the first one who had raised the hand. Jennifer, maybe I'm basing my question on wrong information. Maybe my question is based on some wrong information, but as opposed to French Academy of Arts, as far as I know at least, which uses some governmental supports. Though in the 60s, André Malraux removed the School of Arts from the French Academy by this turning those academies in a closed club. The Royal Academy in London has preserved the school and the independence. And from the very beginning, it was financially independent from the government and from the crown. What you talk today is about budgets and sponsors. And our esteemed colleague in here was also discussing an issue of paying to bloggers, earning money for bloggers. Well, can you tell us, searching for sponsors, fundraising, working with the sponsors, is that your task as well? Do you know a recipe of how to work in such situation? And how does your department, or not just your department, finds some solutions to that problem, but the Royal Academy of Arts of the UK does that, which is so financially independent. And we know, we appreciate how hard it is to get this independence.
In the early days, we got money from the King in the very, very early days. But we've been independent a long time. And we started doing loan exhibitions in the late 1800s. And they've always been paying exhibitions, number one. Number two, we were the first arts institution in the UK, so it meant we set a trend at an early stage. But we do turn over, because we are independent and we don't get any state funds at all, we've put together a business model that really works for us. In the UK generally anyway, there's a 30-30-30 model in place, which is 30% public funds, 30% earned income, 30% sponsorship. And that's generally the way the government likes to work with all funded institutions. For us, we tend to make our monies from, we've got an amazingly successful friend scheme. We've got 100,000 friends who all pay to belong, and that's part and parcel of our business model. We've got a very successful development department, but it's not easy out there. So we've got our friend scheme on the one hand, we have patrons and sponsors on the other. We are in that awful commercial world of having a shop and a restaurant and a bar, but we have to do that. We have a magazine that has subscriptions. We have publications in terms of catalogues. And basically, we put all those things together, and that's our business model. How do we satisfy sponsors? How do we get sponsors? As I said before, and I do know because I had to do a dissertation early on in the year, and I was interviewing all the development directors and directors of all the big institutions, so I got a good feel of what it is they're doing and how they're doing it. And donor care is a big thing. So people like Tate have a department of over 50 people in development, all looking for money and all doing donor care. The British Museum has a big department as well. The Royal Academy has a big department. I'm not sure how big the V&A department is, but development is the big new profession in the UK, and not just in the UK, I would say probably across Europe, and I would say also in the States. And it's sort of cut up in terms of trusts and foundations, legacies, patrons, and so when we talk about sponsorship, I'm not going to go into figures necessarily, but in terms of only so much is actually corporate support. But the business model is made up of all these different other areas, and patrons is a big area, contemporary patrons in particular, and that tends to be it. I hope I've answered your question.
The question of Nina was worth 2 questions. So the third question would be asked by Ekaterina Kochetkova from the Moscow Museum of Contemporary Art.
To feel more comfortable. Here I represent the Moscow Museum of Modern Art, and for 2 years I have been head of press office at the museum. So my question is sort of technical and very concrete. Could you please tell us a little bit more about how duties are structured within your department? Because I remember when I was head of department, it was sort of a hell, you know, with distributing duties and controlling and everything.
Okay.
I know that Royal Academy is a huge institution, and when you showed us the scheme with only 5 people doing all of this, I wonder how you manage it. Thank you.
I suppose we're all schizophrenic, but that's not official. No, so the team, on the press side of things, we've got 2 press officers and a press assistant. And what I tend to do with a press team is one does one exhibition, the other does the other. It's as simple as that, because I find press-wise, you cannot have a press officer across all the exhibitions, because if not, you'll phone up, or a journalist will phone up, and someone won't know, and it's just too much confusion. So it's just simple. At the start of a year, or every 2 years, where you look at it and say, okay, this is coming up. You do that, you do that, you do that. And the summer exhibition, we make sure that alternates, because it's a really big job. It's the organisation's exhibition, and it's really bitty. There are, you know, there's the BBC comes in and films, and there's 12,000 submissions, and it's just a big process. So I tend to allocate that year on year on. I've got one person who does up the architecture programme, and that's actually, so as well as handling 3 or 4 exhibitions, one person has the architecture programme, one person has a Friends Room programme, one person has our small collection programme, one person has the schools. So I sort of cut that up so that as well as your main press office jobs, you've got you sort of look after those projects, and that tends to be that. On the marketing side, for those of you who are interested, what we've got are, what we believe in is drilling down on the discipline. So once more, as opposed to having a marketing officer that only handles one exhibition, I think you'll play into someone's weaknesses and strengths if you do that, in terms of the depth of their expertise and their personality, etc. But if you want a quality campaign, what I tend to do is I've got one person who does print, production, media, advertising. I've got another person who does all of our third-party promotions, new audiences, and market research. And the third person does largely travel, tourism, ticketing, and some special projects. And then the assistants of both teams are the department administrators. So we don't operate with PAs and things like that unless you're really senior. And so that the assistant is generally expected to know everything that's going on and to administrate for us.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer, for a gorgeous presentation.
Thank you.